We live in interesting times. For the headlines. The number of deaths and new cases from China's coronavirus outbreak spiked dramatically on Thursday after authorities changed the way they count infections in a move that will likely fuel speculation that the severity of the outbreak has been underreported. Japan says it will allow some elderly passengers of a quarantined cruise ship and into government-designated lodging as the number of new coronavirus cases on the vessel jumps to 218. More than 10,000 people in villages near Vietnam's capital are placed under quarantine after 6 cases of the deadly new coronavirus are discovered there. And U.S. President Donald Trump dismissed concerns about the Philippines canceling a major military accord, the VFA, saying the decision would save Americans money. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. The number of deaths and new cases from China's coronavirus outbreak spiked dramatically on Thursday after authorities changed the way they count infections in a move that will likely fuel speculation that the severity of the outbreak has been underreported. Take a look. The hard-hit central province of Hubei reported 242 deaths in just one day and 14,840 new patients, by far its biggest one-day tally since the crisis erupted last month. The jump raised the death toll to 1,355 and the total number of nationwide infections to nearly 60,000 just hours after President Xi Jinping touted positive results from the government's drastic measures to contain the virus, and a top Chinese expert predicted the epidemic would peak this month. Officials in Hubei said they were broadening their definition for COVID-19 cases by including people clinically diagnosed with the virus in the daily tally. Now, this means officials can use lung imaging on suspected cases to diagnose the virus rather than the standard nucleic acid tests. China has placed some 56 million in virtual quarantine in Hubei and its capital Wuhan since late last month, and restricted movements of millions more in cities far from the epicenter in an unprecedented effort to contain the virus. With some new cases and deaths in the province that have pushed the national death toll above 1,350 and almost 60,000 infections in total, China has set its efforts at containing the coronavirus. Now, Mr. Zhong Nanjian, or Dr. Zhong Nanjian, a renowned scientist at China's National Health Commission, had said on Tuesday he thought the outbreak would peak in mid to late February. But in Geneva, World Health Organization officials warned against reaching premature conclusions on the Chinese data.
The task is to contain the virus, to detect the cases, to treat the cases. If we keep doing those things, yes, we may see a drop in the number of cases, but I think it's way too early to try and predict the beginning, the middle, or the end of this epidemic.
China has placed some 56 million in virtual quarantine in Hubei and its capital Wuhan since late last month. It has also restricted movements of millions more in cities far from the epicenter in an unprecedented effort to contain the virus. The World Health Organization also fears what it could do in developing nations, many of which are unprepared to handle major outbreaks. Take a look.
This is an example of the international solidarity we have consistently been calling for. Outbreaks can bring out the best and the worst in people. Stigmatizing individuals or entire nations does nothing but harm the response. Instead of directing all our energy against the outbreak, The stigma diverts our attention and turns people against each other. I will say it again. This is a time for solidarity, not stigma. Now, what's important is not stigmatizing a country or attacking a country, but stand in solidarity and fight against this common enemy, COVID-19, or the virus. We have to fight it in unison, as humanity, because we're one.
Elsewhere, efforts are continuing to create a vaccine against the virus. The WHO also touched on 4 options that are in development, the first of which are U.S. creations that may be ready for human trials in April.
Medium term, there are already 4 vaccine candidates in development, and it's likely that there will be 1 or 2 that will go into human trials in about 3 to 4 months from now. So that itself would be a very rapid progress. But
Now, Japan said Thursday it would allow some elderly passengers of a quarantined cruise ship and into government-designated lodging as the number of new coronavirus cases on the vessel jumped to 218. Thousands of passengers and crew on the Diamond Princess, the single largest cluster of infected people outside China, face several days more of quarantine, with many taking and wanting to get off as soon as possible. With passengers mostly confined to their cabins, crew members have to go door to door to deliver food and other supplies, and some fear this has reduced the effectiveness of the quarantine in hospital. 4 who have tested positive for the virus. Test results for the 5th are still being processed. Now, Vietnam announced that a commune of 10,000 people will be placed under quarantine due to fears over the spread of the new coronavirus. Take a look. Now, this is a checkpoint at a Son Loi commune in Vietnam, and the country has placed 10,000 people here in quarantine due to fears over the spread of the coronavirus, the COVID-19. There are 16 confirmed cases of the COVID-19 virus in Vietnam, 5 of them in Son Loi commune. Son Loi is a farming region made up of several villages. Now, Vietnam shares a porous border with China. Vietnam had banned all flights to and from mainland China in a bid to stop the virus from spreading. It also suspended new tourist visas for Chinese nationals or foreigners who had been in China over the past 2 weeks. Meanwhile, residents in Hanoi, Vietnam, queued up to buy face masks as concerns grow over the outbreak. Take a look.
Như đối với cá nhân em thì là hơi bất tiện vì thực ra là cái thời gian làm việc đi ra ngoài cũng không phải là dễ, mà lượng công việc hàng ngày thì cũng khá là bận đấy. Thì nhưng mà vì hiện tại là mua em đi khoa khá nhiều, ngày nào cũng gần như là cứ đi trên đường đi làm khoảng 2 đến 3 triệu thuốc mua khẩu trang y tế mà gần như là không có đâu, hoặc là bán lẻ.
Vì gia đình nhà tôi bên nội bên ngoại cũng nhiều, tôi mua muốn tặng cho mỗi người một cái để mọi người sử dụng, và cũng là mục đích là giữ gìn sức khỏe cho bản thân mình và cộng đồng.
Australia announced a ban on travelers from China would extend for at least a week beyond Saturday's planned deadline as the death toll from the coronavirus soared. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the government would maintain entry restriction on foreign nationals who have recently been in mainland China for a further week to protect Australians from the risk of the coronavirus. A decision to extend the ban further will be taken week to week, he said. The decision is a blow to Australian tourism operators who have seen business from Chinese visitors dry up, as well as for tens of thousands of Chinese students hoping to return to Australia for the new academic year. China's official death toll and infection numbers from the coronavirus spiked dramatically on Thursday after authorities changed their counting methods and fueling concern that the epidemic is far worse than being reported. The virus has now officially killed more than 1,350 people in China, and the World Health Organization has warned the disease has not yet peaked. A U.S. cruise ship blocked from several Asian ports over concerns that a passenger could have been infected with the new coronavirus arrived off Cambodia on Thursday, as frustrated holidaymakers expressed hope that their ordeal may soon be over. The Westerdam was supposed to be taking its 1,455 passengers on a dream 14-day cruise around East Asia, beginning in Hong Kong on February 1 and disembarking on Saturday in Yokohama, Japan. But the ship was turned away from Japan, Guam, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Thailand over fears of the novel coronavirus epidemic that has killed more than 1,350 people in China. Cruise operator Holland America has insisted that there are no cases of the SARS-like virus on board, and Cambodia announced Wednesday that the boat would be able to dock in Sihanoukville on its southern coast. Cambodia's decision to welcome the MS Westerdam was praised by the chief of the World Health Organization.
Based on what we have been told, there are no suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19 on board the Westerdam. The ship will arrive in Cambodia tomorrow morning. This afternoon, I spoke to Cambodia's Minister of Health to thank him for allowing the Westerdam to dock in his country, and I would like to use this opportunity to also appreciate the government, especially His Excellency the Prime Minister. This is an example of the international solidarity we have consistently been calling for. Outbreaks can bring out the best and the worst in people. Stigmatizing individuals or entire nations does nothing but harm the response. Instead of directing all our energy against the outbreak, the stigma diverts our attention and turns people against each other. I will say it again. This is a time for solidarity, not stigma.
Meanwhile, the European Union nations will discuss ways to increase cooperation in a bid to tackle the threat posed by the coronavirus, which has killed over 1,350 people in China and spread to several EU member states. The plans are included in a text drawn up in Brussels on Wednesday on the eve of a meeting of EU health ministers to discuss measures to stem the spread of the virus. It said, quote, EU members should act together in line with World Health Organization recommendations, in particular on surveillance, risk assessment, risk management, and countermeasures to the deadly virus. The draft statement stresses the importance of sharing of information in a proportionate and appropriate manner on persons at increased risk of carrying the COVID-19 virus, while ensuring free movement within the European Union.
Het gaat vooral over de maatregelen die alle lidstaten al hebben genomen, over hoe de patiënten worden opgevolgd.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
When visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. Some of the species that you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump dismissed concerns about the Philippines canceling a major military accord, saying the decision would save Americans money. Take a look.
Well, I never minded that very much, to be honest. We helped the Philippines very much. We helped them defeat ISIS. I get along. Actually, I have a very good relationship there, but I really don't mind. If they would like to do that, that's fine. We'll save a lot of money. You know, my views are different than other people. I view it as, thank you very much, we save a lot of money. But if you look back, if you go back 3 years ago, when ISIS was overrunning the Philippines, we came in and literally single-handedly were able to save them from vicious attacks on their islands. But I haven't heard exactly that, the way you expressed the question. And my relationship, as you know, is a very good one with their leader, and we'll see what happens. They'll have to tell me that.
The 1998 Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA, created a legal framework for the presence of U.S. troops in the Philippines and for organizing joint military exercises. Now, Manila announced its decision Tuesday, a move the U.S. Embassy in the Philippines called, quote, a serious step, touching off a 6-month countdown to the end of the deal. The termination of the Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA, which was signed in February 1998, will take effect 180 days following the receipt of formal notice sent by the Philippines to the U.S. on Tuesday. Now, following VFA's termination, presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo said President Duterte is not bent on entering into another VFA with other countries. He also insisted that VFA is disadvantageous to Filipino troops since it only favors American forces who are visiting the Philippines. Visiting U.S. military personnel can use their permits and licenses in the Philippines, according to VFA. They can also fly to the host country without passport and visa restrictions. Meanwhile, Department of National Defense, or DND Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, said military exercises with American forces scheduled for this year will continue despite the termination of the Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA. However, Lorenzana also said the United States always has the option to cancel the military drills planned for 2020 before the lapse of the 180-day period. Secretary Panelo also said the AFP should defer to the president's pronouncement that the Philippines will stand on its own and avoid relying on other countries. Meanwhile, a top U.S. commander warned ending a security pact with the Philippines would hurt counter-terrorism efforts in the country's restive south Thursday, putting him at odds with Commander-in-Chief President Donald Trump. Washington's top military officer in Asia-Pacific, Admiral Philip Davidson, said he hoped Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte's decision to scrap a deal allowing U.S. forces to be based in the country would be rethought. Davidson insisted the move would hamper military operations in President Duterte's home island of Mindanao, where separatist and Islamist violence has killed some 100,000 people. Though a landmark peace deal with the largest of the rebel groups, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF, was sealed in 2019, the most brutal extremist factions were not included. And those groups include the Islamic State-aligned BIFF and Abu Sayyaf, a kidnap for ransom gang that has been behind some of the nation's deadliest attacks and kidnappings. The rotating deployment of U.S. troops in the country, coupled with a long-standing mutual defense pact and regular military exercises, is also seen as a bulwark against rising Chinese influence in the region. In other news, the former U.S. ambassador, who was a key figure in President Donald Trump's impeachment trial, criticized U.S. foreign policy as immoral and based on threats. Marija Jovanovic, who President Trump abruptly recalled last May from her post as U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, spoke at Washington's Georgetown University, where she received a prize from the school's Institute for the Study of Diplomacy. Jovanovic said the department needs a coherent foreign policy, one that is principled, consistent, and trustworthy. She also said right now the State Department is in trouble. She said senior leaders lack policy vision, moral clarity, and leadership skills. To be blunt, she said, an immoral, keep 'em guessing foreign policy that substitutes threats, fear, and confusion for trust cannot work over the long haul. In October, Ambassador Jovanovic testified to Congress that she was recalled due to unfounded and false claims by people with clearly questionable motives. The 33-year-old diplomatic veteran said she was subjected to a smear campaign orchestrated in part by President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson began a post-Brexit shakeup of his top team Thursday by sacking his Northern Ireland minister, despite his role in restoring devolved government to Belfast. Julian Smith was a surprise casualty of the Conservative leader's first cabinet reshuffle since his victory in December's general election and after Britain left the European Union on January 31. Smith was widely praised for persuading rival parties in Northern Ireland to return to the power-sharing government last month, 3 years after the Assembly collapsed over an energy scandal. But the Times newspaper said Prime Minister Johnson felt blindsided by the deal because it includes an investigation into alleged crimes by British soldiers during decades of sectarian violence known as the Troubles. Smith announced his departure on Twitter, saying it had been the biggest privilege to hold the job and that he was extremely grateful to Prime Minister Johnson for giving him the chance to serve. Prime Minister Johnson held off from carrying out a cabinet reshuffle immediately after his December victory, choosing to wait until Britain left the EU.
That deadline means that if we don't...
China has demoted the director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, according to the State Council on Thursday, following months of pro-democracy protests in the semi-autonomous city. The shuffling of officials at China's top policy body on the financial hub's affairs comes after months of political unrest, the starkest challenge to Beijing since the former British colony was returned to Chinese rule in 1997. Senior Beijing official Xia Baolong, currently Secretary General at the National Committee of China's top political advisory body, was promoted to director, while Zhang Xiaoming was reappointed as a deputy in charge of daily operations at the office. In Hong Kong, millions have taken to the streets since June last year, originally in opposition to a now abandoned proposal to allow extraditions to mainland China. The protest movement then morphed into demands for greater democratic freedoms and police accountability. In recent days, Hong Kong's leaders have faced criticism as well as over shortages of masks and resources that emerge in their handling of a virus epidemic starting from the mainland. Jean-Pierre Cabestan, a political science professor at Hong Kong Baptist University, said the personal changes are aimed at boosting coordination between Beijing and Hong Kong, as well as giving more support to the pro-establishment camp in Hong Kong's Legislative Council. In other news, Indonesia's Mount Merapi, one of the world's most active volcanoes, erupted on Thursday as fiery red molten lava streamed down from the crater, and it belched clouds of gray ash 2,000 meters into the sky. Take a look. Now, authorities didn't raise the rumbling volcano's alert status after the early morning eruption, but they advised commercial planes to take caution in the area. But any activity at Merapi raises concern, and local residents were ordered to stay outside a 3-kilometer no-go zone around the rumbling crater near Indonesia's cultural capital, Yogyakarta. Volcanic ash rained down on a 10-square-kilometer area, according to the Volcanology and Geological Hazard Mitigation Center. Mount Merapi's last major eruption in 2010 killed more than 300 people and forced the evacuation of some 280,000 residents. It was Merapi's most powerful eruption since 1930, which killed around 1,300 people, while another explosion in 1994 took about 60 lives. After months of tireless firefighting, the Rural Fire Service has advised that for the first time this season, all fires burning in New South Wales have been declared contained. Take a look.
After what's been a truly devastating fire season for both firefighters and residents who've suffered through so much this season, all fires are now contained in New South Wales, which is great news. Not all fires are out. There's still some fire activity in the far south of the state, but all fires are contained so we can really focus on helping people rebuild.
A devastating months-long bushfire crisis that killed 33 people has effectively been ended by the downpours, with just one blaze yet to be brought under control in New South Wales. Bushfires scorched more than 10 million hectares in the country's east and south, killing at least 33 people and an estimated 1 billion animals, while destroying more than 2,500 homes. The crisis cloaked major cities, including Sydney, in smoke for weeks on end and saw towns cut off and prompted the deployment of the military to rescue stranded citizens. Now, attention has turned to tackling flash flooding, expected in the coming days following the heaviest rains in 30 years. On Thursday, dams near Sydney overflowed after days of torrential rain, a spectacular reversal from months of drought. The Nepean Dam was just a third full less than a week ago, but on Thursday, video footage showing water cascading over the dam wall. Hundreds of people have been rescued from floodwaters in recent days. For several months, a never-ending stream of bomb hoaxes has forced the closure and evacuations of Moscow courts, schools, and malls, as the authorities appear powerless to act. Since November 28, officials estimate more than 1.6 million people have been evacuated from buildings in Moscow, according to Interfax news agency. Take a look.
Я жду уже больше часа, потому что произошла эвакуация. У меня были планы сегодня вернуться на работу, но, похоже, эти планы мне придется поменять из-за эвакуации.
Эвакуации длились в течение месяца-полутора, в конце прошлого года, конец ноября, декабрь. Где-то в среднем, это очень трудно посчитать, несколько раз в неделю, от нескольких раз в неделю до нескольких раз в день.
Если они будут об этом говорить по федеральным каналам, недоверие к власти будет еще больше. Тогда все станут говорить, что власть ничего не может сделать. Она бессильна. А эта ситуация показала полное бессилие власти.
NASA astronaut Christina Koch, who holds the record for the longest single space flight by a woman, reflects on her experience aboard the International Space Station. Take a look.
We're so excited that you're here today, and we are so excited to be joined by NASA astronaut Christina Koch.
The one that really comes to mind is the first moment that I arrived at the space station. Having learned about the space station for so many years, having it, regarding it as this amazing place where we're doing awesome science to benefit the Earth, a one-of-a-kind laboratory, and to see that it was really real, to sort of meet my new home for the next year was an incredible feeling. It was like something that had been discussed and trained on for so many years was actually come to life. And not only that, but I got to float around in that place, and that'll just be something I'll never forget. And I opened it up, and wouldn't you know, there was Earth, and it just looked exactly like you might see in the pictures, except way more brighter, way more real. And I literally exclaimed, I just said, oh my goodness. And of course, that's not the right thing to say in a spacecraft when, you could be noticing anything not going well. So the very next thing out of my mouth to Nick and Alexi was, everything's okay, it's just Earth. And but it was phenomenal. It was that moment where I realized that, this was real, and that I had left our planet.
Eagle News, we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
.25, same day as the Philippines. Watch your favorite Net 25 shows live and on demand anytime, anywhere on any mobile devices on OSN Play.
Welcome back. The IMF, or International Monetary Fund, is gathering data to assess the full impact of the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak in China, but hopes to see a V-shaped recovery, the fund's managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, said in Washington, D.C. Let's listen in.
Let me first say that before we think about the economic impact, we have to recognize that this is a tragedy for people that are affected, those who lose their lives and their families and communities, and therefore it is right to concentrate first and foremost on restricting the epidemics and then making sure that less people suffer. We are still at the point of quite a lot of uncertainty, so I will talk about scenarios rather than projections. In terms of scenarios, the most likely scenario in our view is a V-shaped impact. In other words, sharp decline in economic activities in China, followed by rapid recovery, and a total impact on China relatively contained, therefore impact on the world economy also contained. But we need to remember that there are uncertainties on the nature of these epidemics and on the way it is impacting sectors of the economies and value chains. We often make comparison between SARS in the early 2000s and the coronavirus. We have to remember that The virus is different, China is different, and the world economy is in a different place. This virus spreads differently than SARS and has already exceeded the number of people who lost their lives in comparison to SARS. The Chinese economy is much more significant for the world. Then it was 8% of the world economy. Now it is 19%, and it is much more integrated in Asia and with the rest of the world. Therefore, disruptions are more likely to cascade down to other countries. And three, the world economy in the early 2000s was in a very strong shape, whereas today we are projecting a relatively modest global growth, 3.3%. It is a sluggish recovery after a downward in last year. For all these reasons, we have to carefully assess what the impact is and turn a scenario into projections. We expect to have more data based on the restart of factories and production in China within the next week to 10 days. Ask me again then.
Meanwhile, organizers of the World Mobile Congress were holding urgent talks over the fate of the world's top mobile fair after a string of industry heavyweights withdrew over coronavirus fears, according to a source close to the meeting said. We are leaning towards a cancellation. It should be announced later in the day, the source told AFP. The GSMA, the Mobile Trade Association, which organizes the annual show, had originally been due to convene a meeting of its members on Friday to discuss whether or not to cancel the show, which this year runs from February 24th to the 27th. But the date was brought forward as an increasing number of industry heavyweights pulled out, with Nokia and Deutsche Telekom announcing their withdrawal just hours before the meeting. The annual Barcelona-based Congress normally draws more than 100,000 people, but this year, participation has been hit by the outbreak of the new coronavirus. In other business news, crisis-hit Japanese automaker Nissan said its net profit plunged more than 87% for the 9 months to December as it struggles with weak demand and fallout from the arrest of former boss Carlos Ghosn. Nissan revised downwards its full-year sales and profit forecasts, but warned that the impact from the spreading coronavirus crisis was not yet included in their figures. Let me express my sincere regrets to shareholders. The company results are weaker than expected, according to CEO Makoto Uchida, who announced there would be no dividend paid. Net profit for April to December dropped 87.6% to 39.3 billion yen, or $358 million, on sales down 12.5% at 7.5 trillion yen for the period. The profit decline was mainly due to weak sales in the United States as well as Japan, where the impact of the nation's sales tax hit auto demand, according to the company in a statement. The European Union slashed trade benefits for Cambodia over the kingdom's human rights record. Take a look. The European Union will not stand and watch as democracy is eroded, human rights curtailed, and free debate silenced, according to EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell in a statement. The move follows repeated calls from the EU to drop charges against opposition leader Kem Sokha, who is currently on trial for treason, a charge widely pilloried as politically motivated. In anticipation, Cambodia's strongman leader Hun Sen said Tuesday his country would now bow its head in the face of the EU's criticism. But the premier warned of economic rough seas ahead for his country, with some garment factories likely to close in the coming weeks as key supply chains from China slow amid the coronavirus. The move by the EU could make a big dent in the country's big garment sector worth billions of dollars. The industry employs more than 700,000 workers, according to the country's factory association. Cambodia is the EU's 6th largest garment supplier, and the country exports more than $4 billion worth of clothing and textile products to the bloc in 2018. Ten months after the ouster of Omar al-Bashir, acute shortages of bread, fuel, and foreign currency continue to hamper Sudan's economic revival. Years of conflict in Darfur and other regions and the secession of South Sudan in 2011 left the country's economy in shambles, the key factor for nationwide protests against Bashir last year. Take a look.
ما في محاسبة نسمع عنه بيهربوا الرغيف وبيهربوا الجاز وبيهربوا كل حاجة، لكن لم نسمع في يوم من الأيام أن واحد شنقوه ولا قتلوه ولا حاكموه.
والله بنعاني شديد، ما عارف الواحد بيعاني من البنزين. يقوم الصباح الواحد يمشي يدزعه، حتى المدرسة الجماعة خلوه، الواحد لازم يمشي يجيب في صف العيش. البنزين، الجاز، الغاز والمواصلات.
Rugby's Hong Kong and Singapore Sevens were postponed from April to October over the coronavirus, joining the Chinese Grand Prix, golf, and football fixtures on the growing list of sporting casualties. Take a look. The announcement comes a day after Formula One's Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai, scheduled for April 19, was postponed, becoming the biggest single sports event affected by COVID-19 so far. The flagship Hong Kong Sevens was slated for April 3 to 5th, with Singapore a week later. Both cities are scrambling to deal with the virus, with 50 confirmed cases each and 1 death in Hong Kong. The Singapore tournament will now take place on October 10 to the 11th, and Hong Kong a week later on October 16 to the 18th, concluding this year's 10-stop World Series. Tokyo Olympic organizers stress they are not considering scrapping the games due to the coronavirus and blast as irresponsible rumors. To the contrary, with only 162 days to go until the opening ceremony, concerns have been raised about Japan's hosting of the games with the virus spreading throughout Asia. Take a look.
Of course, we have unexpected issues to deal with, and for example, the coronavirus outbreak is one event, and we're looking forward to hearing today from the Japanese government, the TMG, and your own organisation on the work that you're doing in collaboration with the World Health Organization, and to ensure that all of the athletes and all of the people who come to Japan for the Games are not going to be affected, and that all of the necessary precautions are being taken.
中国国省に端を発しましたコロナウイルス、無責任なデマも流されましたけれども、東京大会の中止や延期は検討されていないことを改めてはっきり申し上げたいと思います。
やっぱり一番心配なのは新型コロナウイルスによる感染で、どこで収束つくのか今のところ全く目処がついていませんけれども、いろんな情報を聞く限り、インフルエンザよりもそう強い、ウイルスじゃないというふうに聞いておりますし、ウイルスっていうのは湿気と暑さには弱いということですので、日本にはその、梅雨というそういう、ウイルスをやっつける最高のその季節がありますから。
Tokyo Governor Yuriko Koike has promised to implement thorough measures to protect people from the coronavirus in the run-up to the Olympics. Japan has not seen any deaths from COVID-19 but has 28 cases on its soil, with 4 in serious condition in hospital. Another 174 people, including a quarantine officer, have been infected on a cruise ship floating off the Japanese coast, the outbreak's largest single cluster. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's government has come under fire for its handling of the infection, especially quarantine measures seen as too lax in the early stages of the epidemic. The 9th edition of the Bahrain For All kicked off in Manama. To tell us more about it, here's our Middle East correspondent Lorleen Kalimlim reporting from Bahrain.
We are here at Bahrain Bay commemorating the 9th edition of a festival called Bahrain For All, a celebration in Kingdom's accomplishment of creating society where all its inhabitants live in peace despite their differences in religions and beliefs.
This year's annual Bahrain For All celebration, with its theme, Leaving Nobody Behind, holds a 2-day event at the modern face of Bahrain, the Bahrain Bay. The essential purpose of this event is to acknowledge and recognize all nationalities. Despite having different religions and cultures, they freely exercise their rights in the kingdom. This is very evident as mosques and matams are positioned alongside with churches, synagogues, and other places of worship services from different groups. Locals and expatriates introduced some of their special products and services and presented their vibrant cultures with their best performers on stage, with a special participation of the abled centers and schools and the police band from the Ministry of Interior.
Translated in literal English, it's art and anything else. So it was formed to name a group of Filipino art enthusiasts who aims to develop an artistic milieu of camaraderie that promotes art and culture of Bahrain and Filipinos. This artwork that we made is for the event Bahrain For All, All for Bahrain. We would like to thank the whole community and the whole Bahrain itself that we had an opportunity to join this kind of activity where we can share and promote art in our own ways that we are given as Filipinos here, like we are expats. So we would like to thank our Bahrain people and other nationalities that we're here to unite and to experience the whole different cultures of the world, or which nationalities we have here in Bahrain. So that's all.
Creating a society which involves all nationalities who are given the freedom to practice their own beliefs and culture, with the inclusion of abled people in all social events, is nothing less than a blissful feeling. This is a living testimony of the Kingdom of Bahrain, tolerating and respecting people from all walks of life. This is Lorleen Kalimlim, your Eagle News correspondent from Bahrain, and I'm one with 25.
Thank you, Lorleen, and that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again tomorrow evening. From all of us here at Eagle News, thank you, and we'll see you soon. I'm Alma Angeles, always one with 25. Good night.